Oh, Ryan, thank goodness you're here. We need to answer life's greatest question.
22 WMR versus 17 HMR. Which one is the king of the Magnum rimfires?
Welcome to Cartridge Talks.
.22 WMR, that's Winchester Magnum rimfire, versus 17 HMR, its progeny. Which one is the better Magnum rimfire cartridge? .22 WMR has been around for a very long time.
1959.
Holy buckets. It spawned the 17 HMR, a very clever neck down to 17 caliber.
2002.
An absolute crazy successful wildcat.
I mean, this thing came out of the gate hot, Ryan. In fact, it had tons of buzz, a lot of fanfare. I mean, the last cartridge that I saw come out with this much gusto was the 6.5 Creedmoor.
That's a bold claim, Mark. Saw a lot of crazy claims out of the 17 HMR, kind of leaving the 22 WMR in the dust, but I think today we're going to dispel those myths, learn some things,
and see what these cartridges can do.
We're going to start at 100 yards doing a baseline accuracy test. We're also going to collect a little bit of ballistic data to kind of paint the mosaic of trajectory and performance. We're going to then move up to 50 yards, shoot ballistics gelatin, move back to 100 yards, shoot more ballistics gelatin.
And Ryan, I think shooting gel at 50 and 100 yards is really going to illustrate the type of shooting folks are going to do on game, vermin, things of that nature at those distances.
Agreed.
Okay, 5 rounds, 17 HMR. Best group gets ice cream? Well. Look at what we have here. I'll take those 3, huh? That'll play. A little bit of an outlier there, but the good news is with these groups, again, like we talked about before, with what we would use these cartridges for, casual plinking, backyard vermin, farm work, they're both gonna play quite well.
I love how you put a positive spin on things, Mark.
There's always a silver lining.
Is there?
Yeah. Especially when you win. You owe me ice cream.
We've collected paper accuracy, we've collected some chronograph data. It's time for the big show. Which one is terminally the better package?
Ryan, frankly, paper bores me. This is what I'm interested in finding out. 17 HMR, 17 grain VMAX, 50 yards.
It's the cutest little wound cavity ever.
As advertised. I mean, we're often talking about, oh, penetration, this, that. This is kind of what you want it to do on oftentimes your intended target.
5 3/4 inches.
Heck of a permanent wound cavity.
It is. It's miniature. Cool. 22 mag.
Let's go.
Next in the gel will be the 30 grain VMAX from the 22 WMR.
Interesting. All right, let's have a look. Oh.
Mark, what we have here is a bullet that hits a permanent wound cavity where the tip separates, the bullet inverted, I was inverted, and then travels through the block backwards, but effectively not expanded at all.
I mean, I can see where it opened up just a touch, Ryan, but not much.
Heavier jacket thickness on the 22 WMR than the 17, lower impact velocity too by several hundred feet per second. I imagine it might behave a little bit different if you hit some bone or some, liquidy tissue.
Right.
Permagel isn't perfect, but I mean, we get penetration points.
Definitely points for penetration. What do you say we fire a couple more?
Sure.
All right, we've backed up to the 100-yard line. I really liked what the 17 HMR did at 50. Really curious to see what it does at this distance. That'll do.
Sure, you hit the block better in the center. Made it look really nice. That's kind of cool.
I mean, really, repeat performance. Did we get a little more penetration this time?
A little bit, but predictably so.
Yeah, right? We didn't have that high impact velocity.
Still got wild expansion. Pretty cool.
For what I'm going to use a 17 HMR for, this is doing exactly what I wanted to do.
I reckon. That's pretty neat.
I like it.
Cool. Winchester Magnum rimfire at 100 yards distance, 93.1 meters. We're firing from the Savage Mark II rifle. Fire!
All right, Ryan, we saw the 22 WMR at 50. What is it doing at 100?
Exactly the same thing. Small permanent wound cavity up front, total inversion, larger wound cavity, proceeds to about the same depth of penetration, inverted.
Very interesting. Consistent.
I think it would kill a coyote.
I do as well.
Cool.
Ryan, the shooting is stopped, the smoke is cleared, and we have some results.
In fact, we do, Mark.
What are your thoughts here?
I'm going to say I picked 22 WMR because I thought bullet mass and diameter was everything. I'm going to say after reviewing the footage, so to speak, 17 HMR does have a lot of compelling check marks in its positives list. And for you gun nuts watching this, if you want a little information on what we're working with here, here's a rundown. 2 identical Savage Model 93s. These are the synthetic threaded models. We were running them suppressed today. I've got Crossfire 2 4 to 12 by 40 AOs put on these, which is, I think, the perfect rimfire scope because we've got that adjustable objective. We can go down parallax at 10 yards, parallax to infinity. Really basic rifles, shot very well, and rather inexpensive. I think these were a perfect candidate for the test.
Yeah, Ryan, I really enjoyed shooting both of them. That's one of the fun things about rimfires. It's hard not to enjoy shooting them, but I thought these setups were just perfect for what we were trying to do.
Agreed. So let's get down to numbers on these 2 cartridges first and foremost. 22 WMR, today we're shooting 30 grain Hornady VMAXs. 17 HMR, we're shooting 17 grain Hornady VMAXs. Remarkably similar bullet in construction, dramatically different results, as you had mentioned onto the gel. We collected some ballistic information, Mark.
We did.
Let's reference that. Using our handy dandy geoballistics calculator, I had an average muzzle velocity of 2,150 feet per second out of my 30 grain VMAX, which had a BC of 0.095. You had an average muzzle velocity considerably higher,
2739.
which is higher than the box posted velocity.
We don't often see that.
Not so much, considerably higher. Remarkably better ballistic coefficient too. You're into the low to quarter 2s, if you will. The trajectory of the 17 stands on its own. Mass aside, frontal diameter aside, the 17 is, well, speed kills. That's what we're getting at here. For reference, Mark, at 200 yards, which I think we could agree would be the outside operational envelope of these 2 cartridges, I require 9.56 minutes of angle for vertical correction with a 50-yard zero. Where are you at?
I'm at 3.51.
My stars. I have a retained muzzle velocity of 984 feet per second.
I'm at 1458.
And I have a retained bullet energy of 64 foot-pounds.
80.24 for me.
Speed demon. Speed kills.
It certainly does, and in this case, it proved its point. One thing this little experiment got me thinking about was, by all accounts, looking at the numbers, the velocity, the expansion, how flat the 17 HMR shoots, I'm like, well, if I was gonna shoot a coyote, I think I would want the 17 HMR. But then I think about the terminal performance of the 22 WMR, retained mass of the projectile, increased penetration. And I think even though the bullet maybe didn't expand how we thought it might, I think I still picked that.
I think the 22 WMR has stood as long as it has because the varmints that are chasing larger critters, especially fur bearers, appreciate what it brings to the table. Now, that's not to say 17 can't do it. I think that there's not a lot of mass there. There's certainly not a lot of penetration. I think this is probably a better ground squirrel or small fur bearer round. Or if you're on the prairie dog town and you potentially have some distance and wind to contend with, that higher velocity, that higher BC is absolutely going to carry it out. I remember when 17 HMR came out, everybody was talking about it being a 300-yard coyote rifle.
Yeah, I learned my lesson pretty quick.
Same. I think 100 and in, golden. Put your shots in the right spot and that critter's going down. 22 WMR, I'm still with you. I trust it a little bit more on a heavier critter like a coyote. All right, enough of the boring numbers, Mark. Shall we look at the jello?
Let's have a look.
Mark, before us lies the gelatin.
These are the 50-yard blocks. We started with the 17 HMR, Ryan, so let's start there. That's the one in front of me. Like we were talking about before, and as we saw, rapid expansion, super solid permanent wound cavity, some weight retention, about, 6 inches of penetration there. I don't know, I really like it.
It seems like the perfect varminting round.
It did wonderfully.
Yes.
What about you?
Well, a little different story with the 22 WMR. The bullet went into the block, did not really expand much at all. We lost a nose cone at about the first, I'm gonna say 3.5, 4 inches. You get kind of this interesting permanent wound cavity. The bullet then flips over. We get a secondary permanent wound cavity that's much larger, and the bullet tracked backwards almost to the back of the block. Just about 18 inches of penetration on that one.
I mean, where that bullet flips, there's quite a bit of disruption there. I'd say equal to, if not more, than what we've got here with the 17 that did expand. I look at that and I go, well, at the end of the day, I got a pretty solid permanent wound cavity and a ton of penetration. If I was shooting something a little bit bigger, maybe I had a quartering away shot on something a little bit bigger, you've traversed more of that critter.
In my mind, I'm thinking of the 22 WMR as a tiny little anvil, and how fitting for Wile E. Coyote.
I agree, Ryan, and I think at very reasonable ranges, I'll say, I don't know, I mean, I would probably limit my shots to 100.
Oh yeah.
Maximum 150, 200 if you're really pushing it.
I'm with you. I think 100 is far.
Speaking of 100 yards, Ryan, we shot gel at 100. Let's take a look at those.
Very well. 100 yards.
100 yards, and I'd say really consistent performance. I mean, I'm personally not seeing too much different than what we saw at 50, which I did find that a little bit surprising.
A little more penetration, but we expect that. Lower impact velocity. It's going to disrupt the gel less. Particulate is going to go further. I had kind of a mirror image of the 50-yard performance. Same thing, bullet enters, kind of first permanent cavity, inversion, second permanent cavity, bullet traverses backwards to almost the same depth.
Right, right. Again, I mean, kind of a repeat performance. When I look at the 22 WMR, like, pardon me, I get a little disappointed. I'm like, it didn't open like I thought it was going to, but then also, again, at the end of the day, is it doing what I need it to do? Yeah, it is.
You know, a lot of 22 WMR prior to the addition of the VMAX to the line were like full metal jackets.
Right.
Like a flat-nosed FMJ kind of sort of bullet. There's some soft point stuff out there as well, but it's always been a projectile quite different than the regular 22 LR in that usually that was either a soft lead or a copper wash bullet. Like, this is a true jacketed or TMJ bullet. That's kind of what they were designed to do anyway.
Overall, I like what I'm seeing here.
Good. Mark, that was positively delightful.
Ryan, it was so much fun, and it was so much fun because rimfires are fun. This was a question I've been curious about myself for quite a long time. I think folks out there, viewers, are curious about it as well. These two cartridges get compared to one another quite often, and for good reason. They're often used for about the same thing. But you know what you think you know, and being able to look at these bullets as they impact gel at 50 and 100 yards was very telling for me. And at the end of the day, I think I've picked the one that I personally would go with.
I'm a bit juxtaposed, and I think I'm in the camp of buy both.
Always a good option if you can buy both. Well, Ryan, all that's left to do is invite the viewers to join us on the Vortex Nation podcast, where we dive deeper into the gel, extract these tiny projectiles, what's left of some of them. We'll catch you on the next one. Let's go to Culver so you can get me that ice cream.